So earlier today, news dropped that the Las Vegas Raiders decided to go with Pete Carroll as their head coach. And honestly, considering what this organization has gone through for the past 20 years, so much instability, barely any success playoff-wise, made the playoffs 2 separate times, lost both of those games in the wild card round. I think that this is a move where it just feels like a move where you're getting stability at the head coach position. And I think for lots of other organizations, maybe signing a guy who's 73 years old, who's going to be 74 in September when the season starts, probably wouldn't be your number one option. But considering where the Raiders are, considering they just went 4-13, and there's been a lot of instability the past 4 or 5 years with all the different head coaches coming in, this was a home run of a hire for the Las Vegas Raiders. And when you look at Pete Carroll, there's no doubt that he has been a highly successful coach in college football as well as the NFL. And in his time in Seattle, winning a Super Bowl, almost winning his second Super Bowl, you get a head coach where you know that he knows what he's doing. You don't have to wonder and hope that what the person did as a OC can translate to becoming a head coach. And that's the thing with Ben Johnson. When you look at Ben Johnson going to Chicago, it looked like for a time maybe the Raiders could possibly land Ben Johnson. I think because they don't have the quarterback at this time, that if maybe they had the quarterback already, maybe Ben Johnson goes with the Las Vegas Raiders potentially. But the thing with Pete Carroll that you do know is that he can be a great head coach. With Ben Johnson, even though the Bears are super excited, expectant, hopeful that he can be the guy, you don't know that he's going to translate. It's going to translate from him being a great OC play caller to becoming the head coach, the guy who manages everything, creates the culture. And so I think that's what you get with Pete Carroll, is a proven guy. And when you look at his time in the NFL, he goes to in 14 seasons with the Seahawks, he makes the playoffs 10 separate times. And so he has consistent success. It's not like he had, one good year, wins a Super Bowl, and the rest of the years it was just, not great. He has consistently created some really, really solid teams. And when you look at the Raiders and the state of their franchise right now, 4-13 this past year, it really feels like there's nowhere to go but up. And the fact that you have the number 6 pick, you have $92 million in cap space, I do think the Raiders have a lot to work with. And I think that the biggest question now for the Raiders is, what are they going to do at quarterback? What is Pete Carroll's solution to the quarterback position? Because Pete Carroll has to completely transform this entire team. And that's where when you think about expectations for 2025, if this had been a team that in 2024 goes 8-9, then I think that the expectations would be, okay, this team was 8-9, maybe a few games away from being a playoff caliber team. You'd expect that team to then make the playoffs. But being 4-13, honestly, it would be really hard for to have a worse year than you had in 2024 with Antonio Pierce. And so I think that with Pete Carroll, it's going to be interesting to see what he does when it comes to filling in his defensive coordinator, when it comes to the offensive coordinator. And considering he is going to be 74 years old when the 2025 season starts, I think it's mid-September he turns 74. I mean, this isn't a guy who's probably going to coach for, 10, 20 years. Maybe if you land a guy like Ben Johnson and you find success, it could be a coach where you're able to have him for a decade plus. And I think that for most NFL teams, that's probably best case scenario. You get a younger head coach who you're able to grow with for a long, long time. But that's not what the Raiders are doing here. They're getting a proven guy who I think they signed into a 3-year deal with a fourth-year option. For 3 seasons, you're going to get a guy who can really build an organization from the ground up, and that's really what the Raiders need. And the first problem they have to solve, or maybe not the first problem, but the most important problem which any team needs to solve is their quarterback position. And the Raiders do not have an answer on the roster. It's not Gardner Minshew. It's not Aiden O'Connell. And because the Raiders do have the 6th pick, who knows if they'll draft a quarterback? There's a lot of debate when it comes to Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, if they're really good enough to get one of those top picks. I know there's some who believe they should, some who believe they shouldn't. And here's the thing with, rookie quarterbacks. Every single year, the experts, the scouts, GMs, organizations get quarterback wrong. You look at this year, Jaden Daniels goes number 2 behind Caleb Williams. You look at the year before, CJ Stroud goes behind Bryce Young. And that's not to say that Bryce Young can't elevate his career, that Caleb Williams can't elevate his career. But, I mean, looking in hindsight, why was Jaden Daniels not the number one pick? And that's where it's so interesting that these billion-dollar organizations that have owners, worth billions of dollars, $100 million, whatever it is, can't figure out who's actually going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. And when you look at the bust rates in the first round, it's close to 50% for bust rates on first-round quarterback picks. And so that's where, just because they're at number 6 and just because, let's say, people don't think Shedeur Sanders is the same level of prospect as Jaden Daniels, that doesn't mean that Shedeur Sanders can't become an elite quarterback. So I'm curious to see what happens there, and I think that if you do have the number 6 pick, there's no telling where the Raiders will pick next year because they have so much cap space, and because of Pete Carroll being there, you could become a 7-win, 8-win team depending on the kind of moves you make, which definitely takes you out of the top 10 next season. So if you want to go for a top pick at quarterback, this may be the time to try it. And that's a question. Will Shedeur fall to number 6? Will Cam Ward fall to number 6? It's possible. If you are the Raiders, you could potentially trade up if you really wanted to go for either of those quarterbacks. And it sounds like Tom Brady is very involved here with him being now a minor owner. And I saw from Diana Rossini earlier today that Tom Brady is running things right now. And I think he's running things well, getting Pete Carroll. And so I'm curious to see what they decide to do at quarterback. I did see some rumors that maybe Russell Wilson could end up in Las Vegas. The connection with Pete Carroll, obvious from their time in Seattle. It seemed like at the time of Russell Wilson leaving Seattle that there were some questions there, like a little bit of, maybe they didn't leave on the best terms, but it sounds like now from some reports I have seen that they seem to have smoothed things over. And that could be a perfect position for Russell Wilson to land, just because with the Raiders, you're not expecting them to, necessarily make the playoffs next year and go on some kind of run in Pete Carroll's first year taking over a team that only won 4 games. And Russell Wilson, he's not the quarterback he once was, but he did just take the Steelers to the playoffs. He's still, I think he's a solid quarterback. And I think if the Raiders signed Russell Wilson and made a lot of moves when it comes to free agency with all the cap space they have when it comes to the number 6 overall pick, you could easily become an 8-win, 9-win team next year with Russell Wilson on the roster. Do I think he's going to take you to a Super Bowl? No. But he could be an answer for a year, 2 years. You could draft a young quarterback, pick up a young quarterback, and allow them to sit behind Russell Wilson for a couple of years as they learn things. And so I think all in all, it's a very wise decision for the Raiders to go with Pete Carroll. And it's going to be interesting to see how the different decisions he makes to sort of try to revamp this Raiders team, this Raiders organization. If you want more NFL content, feel free to subscribe down below. I put out multiple NFL videos per week, so if you're into that kind of thing, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.